Chapter 10. Rizzo, having finished her breakfast, watched in fascination as the tray floated away from her and disappeared into a wall opening. "How does it work, Orlon?" she asked, intrigued. Orlon explained, "Each tray is supported by a beam of force, tuned to the wave of the instrument you wear on your chest. When the sending force is activated, your tray is placed in front of you at a predetermined distance. After you finish your meal, the beam is shortened, and the tray is drawn back to the food laboratory for cleaning and sterilization. This mechanism could even deliver your meals to you wherever you are on the planet, as long as there is a clear path from the laboratory to you." Mrs. Rizzo replied, "Thanks, but it wouldn't be practical. We need to eat in the Bismark most of the time to keep our cook in good spirits. Rovol's boat is here for me, so I better get going. Are you coming, Dot?" Dot declined. "I'm going to take a break. I don't understand radio, and thinking about those complicated rays and things makes my head spin." "Orlon is taking us to the country of youth, where Margaret and I can hang out with her daughter and friends while you scientists do your thing," said Rizzo. "All right, see you tonight," Rizzo said, as he stepped out into the grounds where the first of Rays was waiting. The flyer was a torpedo-shaped craft made of a transparent, glassy material. It was completely enclosed except for one circular opening or doorway. The midsection was about 5 feet in diameter and had heavily cushioned seats for 4 passengers. The hull tapered down smoothly to a needle point at each end. As Rizzo settled into the cushions, Rovol touched a lever. A transparent door slid across the opening, locking itself into position flush with the surface of the hull, and the flyer darted into the air. For a few minutes there was silence as Rizzo studied the terrain beneath them. They flew over dense forests and vast meadows, with great buildings surrounded by gracious, park-like areas. Rovol finally broke the silence. "I understand your problem, I believe, since Orlon has transferred to me all the thoughts he had from you. With the aid of the Rovolon you have brought us, I am confident that we shall be able to work out a satisfactory solution to the various problems involved. It will take us a few minutes to traverse the distance to my laboratory, and if there are any matters upon which your mind is not quite clear, I shall try to clarify them." "That's being gentle with me," Rizzo grinned. "But you don't need to worry about hurting my feelings. I know just how ignorant and dumb I am compared to you. There are a lot of things I don't understand. First, this airboat. It has no power plant at all. I assume that, like so many other things hereabouts, it is riding on the end of a rod of force?" "Exactly. The beam is generated and maintained in my laboratory. All that is here in the flyer is a small sender for remote control." "How do you obtain your power?" asked Rizzo. "Solar generators and tide motors? I know that all your work is done by protelectricity, but Orlon did not inform us as to the sources." "We have not used such inefficient generators for many thousands of years. Long ago, research showed that these rays were constantly being generated in abundance in outer space. They could be collected upon spherical condensers and transmitted without loss to the surface of the planet by means of matched and synchronized crystals. Several million of these condensers have been built and thrown out to become tiny satellites of Norlamin." "How did you get them far enough out?" Rizzo asked. "The first ones were forced out to the required distance upon beams of force produced by the conversion of electricity, which was in turn produced from turbines, solar motors, and tide motors. With the removal of a few, it became easy to collect sufficient power to send out more. Now, when one of us needs more power than they have, they simply send out additional collectors as needed. Now, what about those fifth-order rays that can penetrate a zone of force? I've heard they're not ether waves at all." "That's correct. The fourth-order rays, whose theory has been fully developed, are the shortest vibrations that can propagate through the ether. The ether itself is not a continuous medium, but rather an actual substance composed of discrete particles of the fourth order. The zone of force, a fourth-order phenomenon, creates a condition of stasis in the particles that make up the ether. These particles are relatively coarse, so rays and particles of the fifth order can pass through the fixed zone without any delay. Therefore, if there is anything between the particles of the ether, a matter that is currently being hotly debated, it must be a sub-ether, if I may use that term. We've never been able to experimentally investigate any of these things, not even the ether, which is a coarse aggregation. However, with Rovolon, We'll be able to extend our knowledge many orders farther in both directions in just a few thousand years. How will Rovolon help you? It will allow us to generate a force of the 9th magnitude, which is necessary to create a zone of force. It will also give us a source of 4th, 5th, and probably higher orders of rays, which are beyond our current reach if they are generated in space at all. The zone of force is necessary to shield certain pieces of equipment from ether vibrations. Any such vibration inside the controlling fields of force renders observation or control of the higher orders of rays impossible. I see. I'm learning something, Rizzo replied cordially. Just like how a more powerful radio set requires more perfect shielding? Exactly. Just as a trace of any gas can render your most sensitive vacuum tubes useless, and just as imperfect shielding can allow interfering waves to enter sensitive electrical equipment, even the slightest ether vibration can interfere with the operation of the extremely sensitive fields and lenses of force needed to control forces of the higher orders. Have you tested the theory of the 4th order yet? No, but it's unnecessary. The theory of the 4th order is not really a theory at all, but rather a mathematical fact. Although we've never been able to generate them, we know exactly the forces you use in your spaceship, and we can tell you of some thousands of other similar and highly useful forces that you haven't discovered yet, but are letting go to waste. We possess complete knowledge of these forces, their liberation and control, and their utilization. Today, we shall commence our work using minimal conventional power, relying instead on 4th order forces, which we shall extract from copper through the Rovolon you have provided. Follow me to my laboratory, for as you know, learning by doing is the best method. The flying machine landed on a lawn similar to the one outside the Orlon Observatory, and the scientist led his guest through the main entrance of a grand structure made of multicolored marble and shiny metal. The vast room inside was lined with benches and filled with hundreds of instruments, including dials, meters, tubes, and transformers, whose functions Rizzo could not fathom. Rovol donned a suit made of transparent, flexible material with a deep golden hue, instructing Rizzo to do the same. He explained that much of their work would involve dangerous frequencies and high pressures, and the suits were absolute insulators against electricity, heat, and sound. They were also ray-proof filters, preventing any harmful radiations from penetrating. As each helmet had radiophones, communication was not disrupted. Using a tiny flash pencil, Rovol cut a minuscule piece of Rovolon and placed it on a burnished copper block. He then applied a force to it, manipulating 2 levers that flattened out the metal particle and spread it across the copper surface. The force pushed the metal into the block until it was in molecular contact with the copper beneath, creating a perfect plating job in an instant. He then cut out a piece of the treated copper the size of a pea, and other forces quickly constructed a structure of coils and metallic tubes around it. Rovol suspended this apparatus in the air at the end of a small beam of force. Next, he cut the copper block in half, and his fingers moved rapidly over the keys of a complex machine that resembled an oversized and intricate typewriter. Streams and pencils of force crackled and flashed, and Rizzo watched as raw materials transformed into a complete power plant with the 200-pound lump of plated copper at its center. This transformation occurred in the blink of an eye, where before there had only been empty space on the massive metal bench. Rovol's hands moved quickly from keys to dials, and suddenly a zone of force, the size of a basketball, appeared around the apparatus suspended in the air. "But it'll fly off, and we can't stop it with anything," Rizzo protested, and indeed, the apparatus darted rapidly upward. The elderly man shook his head as he adjusted more controls, and Rizzo gasped as 9 powerful beams of energy slammed into the brilliant spherical mirror of pure energy, grabbing it in midair and molding it into a complex geometric shape under his bulging eyes. The room was filled with a lurid violet light, and Rizzo turned to the bar as the 200-pound copper mass began to shrink visibly, second by second, due to the enormous forces being drawn from it. The searing, blinding light would have been unbearable if it weren't for the protective color filters in his helmet. Tremendous lightning flashes ripped and tore from the relief points of the bench to the ground, and the rods flared at a blue-white temperature under the constant impacts. Rizzo's mind staggered as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of the forces at work on that stubborn sphere of energy, knowing that the corona loss was only a fraction of the power being used. The old scientist used no tools as we understand them. His laboratory was a powerhouse, and he had access to the incredible forces of a battery of planetoid accumulators, along with the fourth-order, ninth-magnitude forces of the disintegrating copper bar. Electricity, protelectricity, and fourth-order rays, under millions upon millions of kilovolts of pressure, sprang to do the bidding of his wonderful brain, which was filled with the accumulated knowledge of countless thousands of years of scientific research. Watching the ancient physicist work, Rizzo felt like a schoolboy mixing chemicals indiscriminately and ignorantly, with no knowledge of their properties and occasionally obtaining a reaction by pure chance. The master craftsman before him knew every reagent, every reaction, and worked with familiar agencies to achieve his predetermined goals, just as calmly certain of the results as Rizzo himself would have been in his laboratory, mixing equivalent quantities of solutions of barium chloride and sulfuric acid to obtain a precipitate of barium sulfate. Hour after hour, the old man labored on, oblivious to the passage of time in his zeal of accomplishment, while carefully instructing Rizzo, who watched every step with intense interest and did everything possible to assist him. Gradually, a towering structure emerged in the middle of the laboratory. A metal foundation supported a massive compound bearing, which in turn carried a tubular network of latticed metal mounted like an immense telescope. Near the outer end of this openwork tube, a group of 9 forces held the field of force rigidly in place in its axis. At the lower extremity were mounted seats for 2 operators and the control panels necessary for the operation of the intricate system of forces and motors that would actuate and control that gigantic projector. Enormous hour and declination circles could be read by optical systems from the operators' seats, circles fully 40 feet in diameter, graduated with incredible delicacy and accuracy into decimal fractions of seconds of arc, and each driven by variable speed motors through gear trains and connections having no backlash whatsoever. While Rovol was working on one of the last instruments to be installed upon the controlling panel, a mellow note sounded throughout the building, and he immediately ceased his labors and opened the master switches of his power plants. "You have done well, youngster," he congratulated his helper as he began to take off his protective covering. "Without your aid, I could not have accomplished nearly this much during one period of labor. The periods of exercise and relaxation are at hand. Let us return to the house of Orlon, where we all shall gather to relax and refresh ourselves for the labors of tomorrow." "But it's almost done," protested Rizzo. "Let's finish it up and shoot a little juice through it, just to try it out." "There speaks the rashness and impatience of youth," rejoined the scientist, calmly removing the younger man's suit and leading him out to the waiting airboat. "I read in your mind that you are often guilty of laboring continuously until your brain loses its keen edge. Learn now, once and for all, that such conduct is worse than foolish, it is criminal. We have labored the full period. Laboring for more than that length of time without recuperation results in a loss of power which, if persisted in, wreaks permanent injury to the mind, and by it you gain nothing. We have more than ample time to do that which must be done. The 5th order projector shall be completed before the warning torpedoes shall have reached the planet of the Fenachrone. Therefore, overexertion is unwarranted. As for testing, know now that only mechanisms built by bunglers require testing. Properly built machines work properly." "But I'd have liked to see it work just once anyway," lamented Rizzo, as the small airship tore through the air on its way back to the observatory. "You must cultivate calmness, my son, and the art of relaxation. With those qualities, your race can easily double its present span of useful life. Physical exercise to maintain the bodily tissues at their best, and mental relaxation following mental toil, these things are the secrets of a long and productive life. Why attempt to do more than can be accomplished efficiently? There is always tomorrow. I am more interested in that which we are now building than you can possibly be, since many generations of the Rovol have anticipated its construction. Yet I realize that in the interest of our welfare and for the progress of civilization, today's labors must not be prolonged beyond today's period of work. Furthermore, you yourself realize that there is no optimum point at which any task may be interrupted. Short of final completion of any project, one point is the same as any other. Had we continued, we would have wished to continue still farther, and so on without end. You're probably right at that, the impetuous chemist conceded, as their craft came to Earth before the observatory. Crane and Orlon were already in the common room, along with the scientists Rizzo knew, as well as a group of women and children who were strangers to the terrestrials. Soon after, Orlon's companion, a dignified white-haired woman, entered with Dorothy, Margaret, and a group of boisterous men and women from the country of youth. After introductions were made, Rizzo asked Crane how his work was going. "Very well indeed. We're building an observatory in space, or rather Orlon is building it, and I'm doing what little I can to help him. In a few days we'll be able to locate the system of the Phenachrone. How is your work progressing?" "Smoother than a kitten's ear. We're almost done with the fourth-order projector. We're going to use it to grab some dense material, like pure neutronium. We're heading out to a white dwarf star, similar to the companion star to Sirius in Canis Major, to get some material of the proper density from its core and convert our sender into a fifth-order machine. Then we can really get busy, go places and do things." "Neutronium? Pure mass?" queried Crane. "I thought it didn't exist. Of what use can such a substance be to you?" "We can't get pure neutronium, of course, but we need a material of about 2.5 million specific gravity. We need it for lenses and controls for the fifth-order forces. Those rays go right through anything less dense without measurable refraction. But I see Rovol's giving me a nasty look. He's my boss on this job, and I imagine this kind of talk is barred during the period of relaxation, as being work. That's so, Chief?" "You know that it's barred, you incorrigible young cub," answered Rovol with a smile. "All right, boss. One more little infraction and I'll shut up like a clam. I'd like to know what the girls have been doing." "We've been having a wonderful time," Dorothy declared. "We've been designing fabrics, ornaments, jewels and things. Wait until you see them." "Fine. All right, Orlon. It's your party. What should we do?" "This is the time for exercise. We have many forms, most of which are unfamiliar to you. You all swim, however, and as that is one of the best exercises, I suggest that we all swim." "Lead us to it," Rizzo exclaimed. Then his voice changed abruptly. "Wait a minute. I don't know about swimming in copper sulfate solution." "We swim in fresh water as often as in salt, and the pool is now filled with distilled water." The terrestrials quickly put on their bathing suits and followed Orlon down a winding path, bordered with the peculiarly beautiful scarlet and green shrubbery, to the pool, an artificial lake covering 100 acres. Its polished metal bottom and sides were strikingly decorated with jewels and glittering tiles in tasteful yet contrasting inlaid designs. The pool was marked with clear indications of the depth of water, catering to all levels of swimmers. From the shallow end, where the little ones splashed around, to the deep end of 40 feet, where the skilled divers could showcase their talents using the various springboards, flying rings, and catapults. Orlon and the other elders wasted no time and dived straight into the water, using a swift overarm stroke to swim to the other side. They then proceeded to perform a series of synchronized dives and gymnastic routines, indicating that exercise was a necessary form of labor for them. However, it did not evoke the same level of enthusiasm as their mental pursuits did. The visitors from the country of youth, on the other hand, were eager to engage in group activities. They surrounded the 4 terrestrials and suggested a group dive. Margaret, unsure of her swimming abilities, declined and watched from the sidelines with Crane. Rizzo and Dorothy, both strong swimmers, laughed as they were swept away by the green phalanx towards a dock-like structure with a catapult. As they interlaced their arms and legs, someone yelled, "Hold tight, everybody!" and they were flung 50 feet into the air and over the deepest part of the pool. The impact created a mini tidal wave, and they all went down before resurfacing. The rest of the day was filled with informal games such as pushball and water fights. During one such game, Rizzo's incredible strength surprised a green mermaid, who playfully tried to push him under the water. When she failed, she called for help, and Dorothy and a few other girls joined in the fun. The game ended when the signal sounded to end the period of exercise, and everyone returned to the common room of the observatory. Orlon took out his miniature ray projector, no larger than a fountain pen, and flashed it briefly on one of the hundreds of button-like lenses on the wall. As each chair transformed into a comfortable couch, inviting complete relaxation, Orlon suggested, "I think you Earthlings may enjoy some of our music during this period of rest. It is so different from your own." He manipulated his small force tube, and suddenly every light went out. A deep vibration, almost palpable, filled the room, and a faint red glow illuminated the space. A somber fragrance wafted through the air. The music began, starting at the limit of audibility and quickly escalating to a crescendo of sound and color. The lights shifted and blended, creating dizzying patterns that filled the room. Dorothy was awed, exclaiming, "I never imagined anything like it. It's absolute perfection." Orlon noted her response, saying, "Our music is entirely soulless. It is perfect, but almost completely without feeling." He then showed them a three-dimensional screen displaying the four of them seated in the control room of the Bismarck. As Margaret picked up her guitar and struck 4 sonorous chords in the key of A, they heard themselves sing "The Bull Frog" and all the other songs they had sung, as if they were there in person, far off in space. They heard Margaret suggest that Dorothy play some real music, and heard Rizzo's comments on the quartet. "In that, youngster, you were entirely wrong," said Orlon, stopping the reproduction for a moment. "The entire planet was listening to you very attentively. We were enjoying it as no music has been enjoyed for thousands of years." "The whole planet!" gasped Margaret. "Were you broadcasting it? How could you?" "Easy," grinned Rizzo. "They can do most anything with these rays of theirs." "When you have time, in some period of labor, we would appreciate it very much if you four would sing for us again, would give us more of your vast store of youthful music, for we can now preserve it exactly as it is sung. But much as we enjoyed the quartet, Mrs. Rizzo, it was your work upon the violin that took us by storm. Beginning with tomorrow, my companion intends to have you spend as many periods as you will, playing for our records. We shall now have your music. If you like it so well, wouldn't you rather I'd play you something I hadn't played before? That is labor. We could not— Piffle, Dorothy interrupted. Don't you see that I could really play right now with somebody to listen, who really enjoys music? Whereas, if I tried to play in front of a record, I'd be perfectly mechanical. At A, girl, Dot. I'll get your fiddle. Keep your seat, son, instructed Orlon, as the case containing the Stradivarius appeared before Dorothy, borne by a pencil of force. While that temperament is incomprehensible to every one of us, it is undoubtedly true that the artistic mind does work in that manner. We listen. Dorothy swept into The Melody in F, and as the poignantly beautiful strains poured forth from that wonderful violin, she knew that she had her audience with her, though so intellectual that they themselves were incapable of producing music of real depth of feeling. They could understand and could enjoy such music with an appreciation impossible to a people of lesser mental attainments. And their profound enjoyment of her playing, burned into her mind by the telepathic, almost hypnotic power of the Norlaminian mentality, raised her to heights of power she had never before attained. Playing as one inspired, she went through one tremendous solo after another, holding her listeners spellbound, urged on by their intense feeling to carry them further and ever further into the realm of pure emotional harmony. The bell, which ordinarily signaled the end of the period of relaxation, did not sound. For the first time in thousands of years, the planet of Norlamin deserted its rigid schedule of life to listen to one Earth-woman pouring out her very soul upon her incomparable violin. The final note of memories died away in a diminuendo wail, and the musician almost collapsed into Rizzo's arms. The profound silence, more impressive far than any possible applause, was soon broken by Dorothy. "There, I'm all right now, Dick." I was on the verge of losing control for a moment. I wish they had recorded it, for I will never be able to replicate that performance, even if I live for 1,000 years, the musician exclaimed. "It is recorded, my child. Every note and inflection is preserved exactly as you played it," Orlon reassured her. "That is the only reason we allowed you to continue playing, even to the point of exhaustion. Although we cannot fully comprehend the artistic mind of your unique nature, we recognize that each time you play, you create something that no one, not even yourself, can replicate in the same subtle manner. Therefore, we encouraged you to continue as long as your creative impulse persisted, not only for our enjoyment of your music, although that was great, but also in the hope that our music workers could use a careful analysis of your product to determine the precise vibrations or overtones that differentiate emotional and intellectual music.